Sully. Conditioning wins shows. Symmetry and muscularity are secondary. Change my mind.
It depends 100% on the category. If you think of each category as being a different kind of fruit, all right, so I'm just trying to make an analogy, all right. If you have wellness is, let's say the wellness category is a pear. What you're doing is you're looking for the best pear there. So a pear has a totally different symmetry. It has a totally different look. It has a totally different sheen. It has a totally different everything that you want to look at, all the attributes than a pineapple. So let's say pineapple is women's physique. So everything is different. So there are three aspects to physique. And when you look at a physique, there are three aspects that always have to come into play: symmetry, muscle size, and muscle definition. Symmetry is unique to each category in the OCB, because if you think of symmetry not as balanced upper body, symmetry as what is the flow of all the parts you are looking for. The symmetry, a blacked out silhouette, is absolutely totally different in wellness than it is in bikini. So the first thing you have to look at is symmetry to make sure that you are comparing apples to apples, pears to pears, and pineapples to pineapples. It prevents a judge from inadvertently having the best women's physique competitor they have ever seen win a wellness category. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then if you look at the left and right boundary of how much definition or conditioning you can have, there is a left and right boundary that is different for every single category. So whereas in bikini, we'll just take the female classes, where in bikini, you want to see an outline of muscle separation throughout the physique. So you only want to see the outline of the shoulders. You want to see where everything ties in. So you want to see where the shoulder ties into the arm, where the quad ties into the hamstring, where the glute ties into the ham, etc. Then we bump it up to wellness. In wellness, you want to see more detail. From that front pose, you want to see the vastus medius and lateralis. You want to see a thigh rod. You want to see slightly more definition. Now we're going to move it into figure. Figure's even more lean. You want to see fully shaped quadricep muscles popping out. You want to see some delineation of that, and so on down the line to women's physique. The same is true in the male categories. So conditioning wins shows, not at the sake of everything else. Conditioning wins when you hit the upper mark of the boundary for the category you are competing in.
Well, talk to me about this. That's really interesting in terms of conditioning ranges. I've conceptualized it as conditioning ranges. So for something like, let's talk about a couple different categories to make this actionable for people. Like for bikini, what is the lower conditioning range, and what would we see in that type of athlete, and what is the upper sort of Yorton Cup level conditioning range?
The upper, we're going to start with the upper, and we're going to work our way down. Okay, so for the upper range would be a clear delineation where the shoulder ties into the arm. So you want to clearly see where the shoulder ties into the arm. You want to clearly see where the glute ties into the hamstring. From the rear pose, you may even be able to see a faint outline of one of the lines of the hamstrings. You want to be able to see the diamond of the calf. Okay, for the abdominal range, you want to see a faint outline of the rectus abdominis, maybe a little bit in the serratus from the side, because bikini competitors get very, very lean. It's hard to hide that. That would be your upper range. Maybe a faint line or two of a striation in the deltoid. For vascularity, maybe just the vein down the front of the bicep. That should be about it. Very limited amounts on the vascularity. The lower range of that is still where you should see where all the muscles come into play, but that there is muscularity to the physique, because bikini in the OCB is not the same as a fit model or beauty contestant type of physique, or one of the, like, I've seen the physiques from the Angel Wings and those beauty pageants like that. A little bit less defined, more of a beautiful flow to the physique, but a little bit less defined. So you have to clearly show in bikini in the OCB that you are a bodybuilder. It is a bodybuilding category. It's a bodybuilding show, but not bodybuilding like the category of bodybuilding. And that's what gets people confused sometimes. When I always would tell people that bikini is still part of bodybuilding, they're conceptualizing a bodybuilder physique, that much muscularity, that much definition. No, bodybuilding as in the sport. So you need to have enough separation that you can see at least where the glute ties into the hamstring, that there's no extra body fat on that side pose, no wrinkly skin, tightness throughout, a faint outline from the traps from the rear, and at least where the deltoid ties into the bicep. That would be the lower range. Now, the difference between the lower range and the upper range in bikini is minute. Okay, there's not a huge gap there. There's not a huge gap, and there's not a huge gap in all of the categories. But the reason that I train judges that there's a left and right boundary and everything is because there are three aspects to physique, as we said: symmetry, definition, and muscle size. So if you are properly conditioned for your category, but you don't have the prerequisite muscle size, and you don't have the necessary symmetry, there's no way you should win the category. So you have a left and right boundary that you can go by. So if you're carrying too much body weight, if you're carrying too much body fat, it doesn't matter how shapely it is on your physique, you shouldn't win the category. So this is why we talk about the three aspects of physique. Always training symmetry first, because in the OCB, you can only enter one category, and you need to gravitate towards the category that absolutely suits your physique the best. So this way you don't inadvertently have somebody that crossed over into three categories and they're the greatest figure competitor you have ever seen, and they end up placing first and second in every category. Oh, then how it blurs the standards, it blurs the lines. Because in all 7 categories we have, male and female, there is a benchmark for symmetry that you have to look. You have to look at first, black out the silhouette, and you should be able to look on stage and tell the difference in the symmetry between a men's physique, a bodybuilder, and a classic physique. 1, 2, 3. And then you fill in the details and you fill in the lines. And that is why each one is slightly different. And that's the biggest reason we don't allow crossovers in OCB. That's the biggest reason why we don't, let somebody come in and do 4 different categories. I mean, it would be great for profitability, but it's hard to judge. It skews results. And you always have to remember that judges, they might gravitate back, even no matter how hard you train them, they might gravitate back on the last thing they saw that was fantastic. And then they see it come out again, and it's like, okay, you're still fantastic. Yeah, they were fantastic for category A, but not for category B. So that's kind of the nuances of how we do it. And we spend a lot of time working with our judges to make sure that they get the assessment correct.
Most definitely, as I well know, and I think that definitely absolutely adds to the credibility of the OCB judging, in that we could garner more income from allowing people to cross those categories, but that blurs the lines of judging, and you can't get the best athlete fit for a category when you can enter all the categories. It makes it harder on judges. It makes the criteria blurry. I want to get back to this. So you said bikini maybe had, I think, possibly the lowest sort of low and high end range. What category in your mind has the widest range of low and high end body fats?
Probably wellness. And here's where I'm going to go with wellness. Wellness is actually a much harder look than bikini. Okay, it is harder. So if you're going to compete in the OCB in wellness, where we talked about that outline of all the muscle groups for bikini, we want to see more detail than that in wellness. So wellness from the side, we want to see more splits on your front pose. Wellness from the rear, we want to see a greater delineation between your traps and your all those little cookie cutter muscles in the back, your rectus spinae out a little bit more. We want to see more lines through the hamstrings. And when you come around to your front poses, we want to see more striations in the delts. We want to see from the front, we want to see the teardrop of the quad. You wouldn't want to see that in a front bikini pose. When you look at that front bikini pose and that leg is out, if you see a teardrop and the split between the upper thighs and the thigh rod coming down, way too lean. You want to see that in wellness. Now here's where I go with the discrepancy in wellness. And this is mostly in the amateurs, not when you get to the Yorton Cup, to the pro ranks. In most amateur wellness categories, because it is our newest category, the differentiation between the softest and the hardest competitor is wide. So therefore you fall also on what is that variance when you go back to the symmetry component. You go back to that symmetry. Lower body dominant, asymmetrical lower to upper body density, lower body lot of density, asymmetrical. So when you're looking at those asymmetrical physiques and you're looking at that symmetry and you're ranking up your best, some of them might be a little bit smooth. And then you're looking at your more conditioned athletes, and your really, really conditioned athletes, they could be more in tune with a bikini physique. They don't really possess that asymmetrical look. This is why I'm saying you have the widest variation wellness, not by design and not by training, but by what is being presented on stage at a lot of shows. Okay, so that makes wellness one of the more difficult to judge. Now you're going to remember we're 4 years into wellness now, actually 5 years, but 4 years into pro wellness. We're nailing it at the pro physique and it's gravitating its way down. So I only say that because it is so new. Now, when you look at how we're training the variants for wellness, if you go to the Yorton Cup, you will see that all the girls there, especially if you look at the top 9, were very hard, and our champion she was probably the hardest one on stage, but she also had the most lower body density. I mean, she met the criteria. She nailed it. And she was at the upper limit of definition. That was as far as you should go. Do not cross that line, because if you cross that line, you get grainy. And that grainy look, and that super dry grainy look, that's women's physique. So she was right there on the line. But every other competitor that was in that pro category, did have that hardness. So I'm talking about the broad spectrum, so that when people who listen to this are looking at results and they're seeing things on Instagram and they see these wide divergences between the definition level of somebody who plays third and first, it's because it's new and it's still trying to gain its momentum. If you remember back a decade, 15, 20 years ago, about 15 years ago, when we started adding bikini. Bikini was the same thing. It was a whirling dervish, until it came into its own and everybody fully understood the criteria. But not by design, just by who is showing up on stage. And that's why I wanted to point that out, because so many people go on Instagram, so many people go on the videos, and so many people see things and they're like, second place was kind of smooth, and first place was medium, and third place was ripped, but then fourth place was smooth, and then fifth place was... It's because you have to look at the totality of the physique, and it just adds a wider variance.
And it begins with symmetry and or asymmetry for particular categories.
Yes, starts with symmetry. Symmetry is the foundation of everything that we look at the OCB. It's not the begin all. So this is the one thing I want to make coaches and competitors aware of. The best symmetry isn't going to win. The best symmetry is the symmetry that matches the criteria the best. And you could match the criteria the best as a blacked out silhouette. And then as soon as we add in the details, the person that had the second best symmetry has the right amount of muscular detail and the right amount of muscle size, and it flip-flops and you fall to third place. So symmetry puts you into the equation. Symmetry puts you that, so this way we don't inadvertently reward a really, really great bodybuilder who might be very blocky and narrow in the lats, first place in classic physique, because, he was the most ripped or the most good, whatever. You're trying to match together all the people that perfectly meet the symmetry for that category first. You put them together in your head, and then you do a deep dive judging attack, and you look for which one meets the criteria, the absolute best based on all three factors. So we talked about definition. We're on conditioning, so let's talk about conditioning. If you look from the male categories, the conditioning level of a classic physique competitor should fall in line with what I call the classic era of bodybuilders. So let's say Lee Haney, back down to maybe Sergio Oliva when he won his first Mr. Olympia. That's the level of definition. That's your left and right boundary. What did all of those guys have in common? If you look at watch Pumping Iron, Arnold had fully developed quadriceps. You could see all the muscles in the quads. You could see striations in the chest. You saw striations everywhere. But what was the differentiator? You did not see that uber dry, grainy look that you have in a modern bodybuilder where everything was cross-striated from the glutes on down. Too defined. Nobody had that back then. Now you look at men's physique. Now men's physique competitors, they have more width than density, but they have to have a good deal of muscle definition because they have the smallest waist and tiniest hips out of all the male categories. Those guys have 28-inch waist at some of these 28-inch waist at a 6-foot tall guy. It's incredible to see. If you're going to have that small of waist, you're going to have a low percentage of body fat, but they're not going to look as grainy and they're not going to look as hard because they don't carry the density that a bodybuilder would carry. So they're not going to have that dry, overly shredded look because they have more width than density. And then you go into the bodybuilding look. The bodybuilding look is as dense and as muscle packed as you can possibly be, and as absolutely dry and shredded as you can possibly be. So you can't really place the three categories in a level of the least defined is men's physique and the middle is classic, because the type of definition you're looking for is different. You need far more density and far more size, balanced size, in classic physique. So therefore, you're going to appear harder in some areas than you would in other areas based on how the physique is displayed. So both low percentage of body fat's just totally different. You're going to see tighter abs and better serratus in a men's physique competitor, but you're going to see more chest striations and you're going to see more back feathering in a classic physique competitor because of the way they pose and the amount of density they carry. And then the most ripped is bodybuilding. The women's categories are a little bit simpler, where the least defined is bikini. The second most amount of definition you want to see or conditioning you want to see is in wellness. The next would be figure. And then finally, women's physique. Women's physique is where you want to see that grainy, dry, striated look. So that's just conditioning. But you also have to factor in the symmetry. And then do you have the prerequisite amount of muscle size? So all those things factor in. This is why we have so many, judging classes. Our judges don't just go out and judge. There's a lot of in-service training that's their obligation before they actually sit at a panel.
Which we very much appreciate. And I think that's some of the best training that you can get. I want to come back to this men's physique thing and conditioning ranges. Would you say then that men's physique has possibly one of the smallest conditioning ranges for what is the lower bound of conditioning, since part of the aesthetic is this really dry midsection? So that floor is a lot higher to me when I'm thinking about the ranges as compared to classic, as compared to bodybuilding.
Yes, because when you look at a men's physique competitor, they're trying to get as wide and as great of a V-taper as they possibly can. That dieting and that conditioning is always going to be bringing out they should see, you should be able to see your serratus, you should be able to see every abdominal muscle popping out like a ravioli, and some vascularity in there, because it's the only way to get your waist that small. I know as a competitive bodybuilder, I was a bodybuilder, I'm short, I'm 5'6", but in my heyday, I had a 28-inch waist. And if I didn't get down to a 28-inch waist, it affected my taper from the front and back poses. When I competed at a 29-inch waist, which was still muscular, the difference between my conditioning, especially in the abdominal region, predominantly in the abdominal region, was night and day. And so now imagine that with men's physique competitors at the upper echelon level. Just watch the finals of the Yorton Cup. You got to be shredded and you got to be dry. But like I said, it's a different kind of muscularity. You don't see all the cross striations happening in the chest and through the shoulders and through because they're not hitting the actual poses, but B, because the amount of density that they carry is not to the same level as classic physique and bodybuilding. And remember, and you know this from being a scientist, when you start adding density to a muscle and you add more 3D and you get it leaner, it actually looks more striated across a greater range because it has more three-dimensional pop. Where in men's physique, we're looking more at the width rather than the density. We don't want to see the big bubbleless chest and the high rib cage, and the big thick arms. We want to see a wide classic V-taper with a nicely capped deltoid. Some arm muscle, some arms are, you got to have arms because you're not going to be able to have a back like that doing all those chin-ups without developing some biceps and some triceps. But that's not the foundation of the physique that we're looking at. And we're looking at more cap, more width than all the thickness and density in the back. So because it's a different style physique, the hardness looks different. But I would dare say that if you take the body fat comparison measurements of a men's physique competitor on show day and probably a bodybuilder on show day, I bet they're very, very close, with the difference being the density muscle factor and how that muscle is being carried.
I've never heard you talk about this one specific thing, and I want to hear you riff on it a little bit. Are a person's genetics a great factor into what category they're going to be in?
Abso-friggin-lutely. Sorry, I would have used the other word, but this is a family channel. Yes, they are. And here's the thing that our judges are encouraged to do. when providing feedback. And as you know, all of our judges are mandated to provide feedback when asked. They have to. Feedback can only be done in writing and has to be based on the criteria. So when they're doing that, I'm always encouraging the judges that if you see a perfect bodybuilding physique that wants to do classic because they fell in love with the latest, Mr. Whatever, and that person's the most popular person on the internet, so that's what I want to do, but it doesn't fit them, to let them know you have a better off-ramp here. And I'll use myself as an example. In this modern era of bodybuilding, if I were to come back into competition, I would more naturally gravitate to being a classic physique competitor. I had much better balance, much better flow, and a good degree of hardness that would meet the criteria better. But I love bodybuilding. So if I were to come back and go into bodybuilding, I probably wouldn't be placing as well because in chasing the grainy look, the uber grainy look, I always got a little stringier. And density being such a prerequisite in bodybuilding, you end up, when you black out that silhouette, you look more like a triathlete than a bodybuilder. Just because you're the most ripped physique on the stage, as we said, you still have to have the prerequisite, look, etc. So I would fall better into that. A very good friend of mine, I'll leave him nameless, old-time competitor I competed with back in, the A and BC days, back when there was just A and BC and WNBF for natural bodybuilding, and we were going round and round back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and early 2000s. He had a very, very, very thick waist. He had a very, very blocky look. He would never be the best one on stage in a front or a back lat spread or the front or the back front standing or relaxed pose. But I have to tell you, when it came to competition, he had the best hands on hips most muscular, side chest, side tricep, front double bicep, back double bicep, crab most muscular pose, and he always looked the best from the side poses. So if you factor all those 13 poses in, the only 4 he didn't look good in were those. And he was an incredible bodybuilder, absolutely incredible. Now, he was talking to me recently. He says, Sully, I want to make a comeback. I'm only 55 years old. 55 years old, I want to make a comeback. I'm like, great, absolutely. And he said, now I want to do classic physique. And I said, break, time out. Go back and review classic physique. Why do you want to do classic physique? Oh, because I love this guy, and I got a mustache, and he's gonna. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. That's fantastic. Go on, watch the Yorton Cup. Look at the bodybuilders, look at the classic physique, guided him around, and he came back and he was like, yeah, I can't do classic physique. I'm like, probably a good move for you. So yes, absolutely, there are people that can gravitate better into other categories. And also, I bet we have people that are competing at the Yorton Cup level that could enter category A one year and be a champion, make some tweaks, enter category B and win that, and make some tweaks and win category C. We have some people that are just genetic superiors that can do that. But the vast majority, you have a niche where you fit the best, you should gravitate towards that and maximize your potential for that category.
Most definitely. Like the one that stands out to me, just genetics and hard work. Our classic physique champ, Yorton champ, Dawson, last name Dawson. That just the fullness and roundness. If he chose to get grainy, I mean, I think he could do well in a crossover to bodybuilding. But go ahead.
Absolutely. I could. That is exactly who I think about when it comes to that. Also, if you look at somebody like Eric Shelton, a former Yorton Cup champion, he was runner-up last year. He could add a little bit more detail here and there, whatever, and go right into classic physique and be right at the top of the leaderboard in classic physique. We have competitors who have done that at the very highest level, and there are some like. Domain is somebody I could see who could be a champion at that level, in both those categories. But we have a lot of very successful competitors, that are bouncing around and trying these different categories. I just promoted the double down, and one of our top 3 in the overall the double down in men's physique is now going to be competing at the Hall of Fame in classic physique. And I'm waiting to see this jump over. So here you're talking about a men's physique competitor that's a top 3 pro, top 5 at the Yorton Cup, top 3 in every pro show he enters. It's like, what I think he will do very, very, very well. So there are those people that can do that. But then there are other competitors that, they come to me and like, hey, I think I should I want to try wellness. And I'm a great bikini competitor. And I'll look at their physique and go, okay, I don't know if a year of squats and leg presses and lunges is going to be enough to get you there. So yeah, I do believe that you should go with your genetic advantages and maximize your potential there, even if your favorite category is something else.
Most definitely. So coming back to this idea of competitors, where they fit. So what do you think most competitors misunderstand about how placings are determined, and what kind of incorrect narratives do they have in their heads after shows?
The biggest incorrect narrative that I hear all the time, is based on judging subjectivity and biases. When I look at the competitor and I can analyze exactly where they went wrong and what they did wrong, but it's easier to go back on that fallback instead of turning around and doing the internal work and stuff. So that's the biggest thing I hear. And Josh, you know this because you've been in on the meetings. What do I say about judging in the OCB? It is not subjective, it is objective. The objective is to absolutely positively understand the criteria that I've trained you over and over and over again and apply it properly to the physiques on stage to determine the outcome of the best winner. What happens with competitors is they either listen to their coach or they don't read that. The number of competitors that I ask this question to, and the number of coaches that I ask, have you reviewed the criteria on the OCB website? No, the criteria is the criteria. It's the same everywhere. Okay. Have you sat in on one of my coaches' seminars? I give 2 or 3 a year where I train the coaches to the exact same standard I train the judges so that the coaches know exactly how to prepare a competitor and exactly what we're looking for. No, I didn't bother with that. It's all the same everywhere. Okay. So you didn't read our criteria. You don't understand the nuances of what we're looking for. And you're falling back on what you've heard for centuries in bodybuilding, that judging is subjective and that everybody's going to pick a favorite and blah blah blah, without understanding the checks and balances that we have in the OCB to prevent that. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say most federations, because I have judged for, well, a lot of the federations aren't around anymore, but other federations that are in existence, I think I've judged at least once or twice for all of them. And I can only think of 1 or 2 federations that I've ever worked with, and I will leave them nameless, where I know that my input and what I put down on paper had absolutely positively no meaning whatsoever. Now, those are federations that give everybody else a bad name. And because it's happened, and I've competed in situations like that, and it's happened to me, and that's why I wouldn't go back there. That has become the common narrative throughout the sport. I didn't win, so the fix was in. The judges are fans with this one or friends with that one or this happened or whatever, instead of looking in and doing the deep dive and going, what did I do wrong? What can I do better to understand the criteria? And as you know, we now have a set system that is mandated for everybody to use for feedback. And by utilizing that feedback, our goal is to provide every competitor with the task, condition, and standard necessary to meet the goal of winning or achieving a higher placement or a victory in an OCB event. And on top of that, they break down everything into the 3 aspects of physique and provide them with the right critique information and give them the right areas to go to. So I think that's the biggest disconnect when it comes to judging and what I hear about judging. And it's because it's so repetitive. You hear it over and over and over again. It becomes like this playback loop and everybody's just whatever. Now, one other thing I'm going to give a bit of advice to for every competitor out there, and that is when you're looking at your photos. And this is something I learned early on in my career. Every time 100 photos are taken of you, you're going to find 2 that are your favorite because you're at the right angle, in the right lighting. Everybody else is not flexing. You're flexing, and it makes you look the best on stage. Everybody gravitates to those 2 photos and goes, see, I should have won. I always looked at the 98 photos where I look like crap on stage or I'm not the best and use those to analyze and assess my physique to see how I did. And that always propelled me to improvements throughout. And also listening to the judges' feedback. Not all judges' feedback is exemplary. I've had bad judges' feedback in the past, but this is why we have set up that systematic approach that's mandated by all judges to use. Because what I found out with judges and with feedback a lot of the times is, where to go, how to begin, how do I articulate this, where do I go with this? Now we've got that. So competitors competing in the OCB, you should be getting better feedback from highly trained and qualified judges. There's no nepotism or fairness in here because every score is reviewed and every single tabulation sheet in the OCB comes to me. I review every single judge's score. And if I see an anomaly, somebody who placed somebody way out of the norm, I'm sending an email to say, what happened here? Also remember, the high and low score always drops, so even if you've got somebody that's gunning for you, it's not going to affect your overall score because that score would have been dropped to begin with. But this is how we maintain the continuity of our judges and ensure it. And also, our judges cannot judge a friend, a family member, a member of their bodybuilding team, or a client if they are involved in any kind of, they have any investment in how somebody places on in the sport. They have to notify the promoter. They have to get up out of the judging chair. They have to go sit in the back of the auditorium when that person's on stage, and they come back and they flip around. So these are continuous checks and balances. So I just say that so that hopefully people are more aware that if you fall into that narrative of, oh yeah, the judges are screwed, it's objective, and oh yeah, there's always a fix-it or whatever, you're never going to look at your own physique. You're never going to analyze the criteria and assess how it applies to you and then make the improvements to meet the criteria better. You're just going to fall into that loop narrative and just be going around in circles.
Those narratives can be very powerful. And so that's sort of the competitor lens. I want to jump over to the judges. So when you train judges, where do you see new judges struggle the most?
Wow. It's all over the map. Are you talking about a category that they routinely struggle with the most, or breaking into judging and breaking bad human habits? And I'll call them human habits because people have human tendencies and it's hard to break that. Are you
give me tendencies, and then categories. So
Okay,
bad habits and then categories.
For category, they're always best at the category that they came out of. Always. So, if you come out of men's physique, you will always judge men's physique better. But when it comes down to the nuances, I think far more competitors struggle, or new judges struggle with bikini that aren't bikini competitors than any other category because conditioning isn't the vital factor in that. Now, there are federations where conditioning counts in every category, and the most ripped bikini competitor is going to win. It makes it very easy to judge. Oh, that's the most ripped physique up there. Bing. There you go. Move on. However, that's not the way that we do it. So struggling with looking at a physique and trying to assess them more on symmetry and all those other stuff, and the nuances becomes a little bit more of a struggle. Also, bikini is a beast in and of itself because we have so many great bikini competitors. I hear it from competitors all the time. I won this show, but I came in fourth in this show. And I always say the same thing. Look at your lineup. If we put the top 5 out 5 different days in a row, each one of you would have won a different day because the gap is very small. So therefore, it makes it harder, and you really need to understand the criteria. And new judges struggle with that a little bit. Okay, they do. They struggle with that one a little bit. I think that most of the time we still arrive at the right conclusion because there's generally enough senior judges and junior judges on every judging panel to get there. Now, the tendencies that people judge with is humans are humans. And you're always going to want to gravitate to what you like versus then what's on the menu. I know judges all the time, I like a softer bikini competitor. Well, that's great. I like jelly donuts, but if I have those for dinner all the time, I'm going to get sick, and it's wrong. So you need to go by the criteria. And this is where I do all of those reviewing the score sheets. So if I see a judge that's struggling with a category because I like classic physique competitors that are way more shredded. Okay, well, that's great. And now I'm looking at your scores. I go back, I look at the videos, the live streams, the photos, and I'm going like, yeah, you were way off here. And then we sit down, and that's when we can do retraining until they fully understand and they comprehend what we're doing. And this is why we have so much retraining in the OCB. It's to break those human tendencies of gravitating to what you prefer to look at over what the category says to look at. When it comes to art, I'm not so much into Pollock. I mean, I look at his art and I go, okay, it just looks like it looks like one of those ink blot tests that you take. It's like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Monet got me every single time. I'll sit down and watch that all day. But they're both art. But if I'm asked to assess art, I need to understand nuances of Pollock. I need to understand everything that goes into that. I need to understand that as art so I can properly assess it. It might not be my preference. I might rather, when I go to the museum, I'm going to go over here to, X and look at these as opposed to Y and look at those, but I still need to look at Y and understand it. So same is true when it comes to physiques and when it comes to judges. That's a tendency that's very hard initially to break. But with all the training that we do, and they always know that daddy is watching, and daddy's going to email them if he doesn't like what, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing here? And it puts them more in tune with the game. And also, judges are communicating with each other before the show. And they're communicating with each other, when the judging is going on. And they know that they can ask the head judge, listen, I want to make sure I'm on point with this. Am I looking at the right things? Now, a head judge is never going to turn around and go, competitor number 4 is the best, put them in. They don't do that. They'll remember the criteria. The symmetry is this. Level of definition is this. And this is why at the judges table at a lot of shows, people have the criteria printed out for every category, and they go back and they'll look and they'll be like, and I see it happen all the time with a new judge. They'll be like, and they're looking at their notes and they're going, now I know what I'm looking at. And it's these checks and balances that help break that tendency.
Help break more of the subjectivity. So let's move slightly on from judging. The scores are in. How does the OCB deal with these tiebreakers? These competitors are close. We've had multi-way ties. Break down the tiebreaker for me.
The tiebreakers are very simple in the OCB. There is only one way that we do tiebreakers. So, as let's say there's 5 judges. So we have 5 judges judging. You already know we're dropping a high and a low score. Now, if you have 2 competitors tied, you add the high and the low scores back in. And then you look down each column. Where did judge 1 place it? Where did judge 1 place? Who did they place higher? Okay, they placed this competitor higher. You circle it. And then you go to judge 2. Who placed them higher? Okay, that competitor. Circle it. That competitor. So whoever has the most circled scores at the end gets the tiebreaker, because you're looking at the consistency of the judges who consistently place somebody higher than the other person. So high and low added back in, and then you just consistently go over and see who got the higher placement all the way along. We don't do a head judge's score counts twice. There's no rock, paper, scissors. We don't ask a shoe size or pick a number or any of that other stuff. We found the fairest way to do it is the consistency of the judges. And now you know who was placed higher by the majority, and then they will get that placement. And this is why there's always an odd number of judges. There'll always either be 5 or 7.
Take this one layer deeper for me. I have inside information. You and I were at a show together. There was a tiebreaker that needed to be done where it was more than a 2-way tiebreaker.
A 3-way tie.
A 3-way tie. How do we break that?
Yep. The first thing you do, you work from the bottom up. Work from the bottom up. So if you have a 3-way tie, okay, you're going to have 2 competitors that get the highest score, and then 2 competitors that get the highest score, and then 1 competitor that gets the highest score. So let's say you had 2 people with first, another 2 people with a first, and 1 person with a first. The one person who got the first, they go into the 3rd place. Now you've got a 2-way tie, and then you go da, 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 da. So, it's going to be the most consistent way to do it throughout. Because if you look at all 3 people and you're circling the high score, you have 2 people with a first, 2 people with a first, 1 person with a first. Okay, all right. Now it goes down to the highest score. That person gets 3rd place. I'm saying it's a tie for first place. And then you go into the other 2, and then you throw everything back in. So you work from the bottom up. And the scores will usually reflect that. Usually when it's something like on a 3-way tie, let's say it's a 3-way tie for first, it's usually the seconds and thirds that become the hiccup that produces the 3-way ties. It's usually the lower placements and how they fell in. So working at the higher placements, and then you work up, bang.
Excellent. So with that 3-way tie, just so I'm wrapping this around in my mind, we bring all the judges' scores back in. We take the individual in the 3-way tie who received the fewest first place votes, so they're just
or the fewest highest place votes.
Highest place.
I just used first. So the fewest highest placing votes. Whoever got the fewest highest placing votes automatically down to third place because they got the fewest highest placing votes. It could be a tie for third and they got one first place. And then everything else was a third or a fourth. That gravitates them down. So now you're going with the consistency of the judging panel as to who had the highest consistent scores. So the two competitors that had the most consistent high scores throughout would get the tiebreaker. Because you're always going to have one person, or you're always going to have two people that are going to be pretty close, and then you're going to have that one anomaly that had the wild 8 and then the wild 1 thrown in. And that's how we got to the, that's how you got to the three-way tie. So that person is initially removed, they get the lower placement, and then you work your way back up to the top. So it still factors into the most consistent, highest placements.
Excellent. Let's get broad with this. So how does the OCB's judging philosophy differ from other federation? What sort of intentional values do you think drive that?
I don't know. And I have to say that I don't know because I honest and truly, I have not judged for another federation in 22 years. I honest and truly do not know what their practices are or what they're trying to do. I kind of believe that every federation is trying to do the best they can based on what they have, who they have, and the amount of bandwidth that they have to put in. But I don't know where anybody else is going because I don't pay any attention to what's happening. So that's the one thing I want to say straight off the bat. I will never ever say that OCB has the best system. I'm not going to say that. I don't know what other systems are. What I will say is I have many, many friends. I have good friends that own other federations. And I know that their heart is into it. And I know they're always trying to do the right thing. Now, the only thing that really separates the OCB from other federations is that we have 4 people in our ownership group. All 4 people spend between 40 and 80 hours a week in managing, navigating, and improving the organization. We also have people that we bring in tiger teams to help us arrive at the right answers. That template that we have for judging feedback, I didn't create that. Jody Sheckley-Wright created that. That came from her on a little bit of a tiger team, turning around saying, how can we do this? Here's our problem. Here's our problem. I need to bring people in to help me navigate this problem, lead the team, but let my teammates come up with the best solutions to plug in, and then find the best solution, assess it, and then plug it in. Therefore, if it sucks, it's my fault. But if it's good, it is the team that put it together. Because that's the differentiating factor that we have, is that we are a leadership team. We're not just a bunch of muscleheads. We all have high levels of leadership experience. We've all been professionals at different levels, etc. And we bring leadership experience in, but we also bring in a huge amount of bandwidth. And we also empower people to help us flow and make the right decisions. There's nothing worse than the person that is doing something and it's me, I, me, I, me, I. Okay, well, that's wonderful for you, but how do you know you're doing the right thing? Where's your data points? Who are you bringing in? And it ain't about you, bro. It's about the shiny people on stage. So with us having such bandwidth, with us having the time to invest, with us empowering and developing tiger teams and having them come up with better strategies for us to implement and having us work on this all together, it becomes a we instead of a me or an I. Now I'm responsible for this lane. This is my ship. If it crashes and burns, I'm the captain, it's my fault. The crew is absolved. It's my fault. But if we get to our destination and we did a damn good job, then the crew gets 100% of the credit. It ain't on me. So that's what sets us apart. So I don't mean to seem like aloof on that. I just don't know what the other practices are because we're so busy and focused on trying to be the best OCB that we possibly can be. I don't have time to look around and see what's out there or what they're doing or how they're doing it. I honest and truly, I don't mean this to sound crass because I have such good friends that run all these other organizations. I just don't care. Because if I'm worried about what you're doing, I'm going to lose track of what we're trying to accomplish. So I can't worry about how you're doing things or where your gaps are or, we're better than you in this and you're better than us. I can only take in the data, put the tiger teams together, implement the proper solutions, train everybody to the appropriate level, and look for the acceptable result. And if it's not there, continuous process improvement. OCB is about continuous process improvement. Everything is CCP with us. So when you look at a failed, something that we're doing that's failing, then we need to come up with a corrective measure, and we need to implement it, and we need to move it forward. Now, the other thing is that we've only been together for 4 years as a leadership group. And if you look at the things that 4 years ago the organization was doing, and you look at how many changes we've had every single year, it's because as we move forward and we see these things are changed for the betterment of the athlete, for the betterment of the sport, and for the betterment of the OCB. And that's why we keep moving forward. And we always want it for the betterment of the sport. So everybody, seems to think that, you got to be part of organization X, Y, Z, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. If it's natural, it's natural. And this is the number one reason why our athletes have no restrictions and no reprisals. If there's a natural federation out there, you go for it. Honor it, enjoy it, have fun, appreciate it, because that is what it's all about. It's about the natural aspect of the sport. So we do everything we can to support natural bodybuilding, but we focus in solely on our product because we can't take our eye off of the target. And the target is trying to reach 100% accuracy in all judging, 100% customer satisfaction. Now, is 100% a legitimate goal? No. All my years in the military, I'd always say the same thing. Hey, Chief, what are you looking for a run time for your 2 miles? I'm going for 12 minutes, 2 6-minute miles. Do you think in my life I have ever run 2 6-minute miles? Nope. But every year I went for it. That was the goal. And same with us. Will we ever get there? I don't want to think that we can't, but that's the goal.
So, I mean, you bring up so many great cultural pieces about why I love the OCB, and I want to bring up another thing that I feel like the OCB does well, and that is chain of custody when a competitor has won a pro card, and the importance of that chain of custody, taking them from that stage to the backstage area, not having their family come up. Could you talk about the importance of that sort of chain of custody with the athlete, getting them to their urinalysis, and why we go through this big process and the cost?
First and foremost, on the chain of custody, that's kind of a twofold thing where our being so anal about chain of custody comes from two things. One, when the OCB started, it started with just Matt and I. Matt was the owner and I was just the only promoter. When we were going to do urinalysis testing, and of course being in the military and being a police officer, everything was about chain of custody and having to do it. We had to do it like this, and I became obsessive with it. And Matt was he was a rule follower, and let's always build a better mousetrap, and he was always looking and tinkering and trying to improve things, and he was the same way. But we had a situation where somebody failed a urinalysis test way back when, and they tore apart the chain of custody, and it was like, oh crap, a cheater's going to get back in. And that was like 15, 20 years ago. And that was it. From that point on, it was like you will capture them, you will escort them, and boom, boom, boom. And this is why we always continuously reinforce that. So you are going to get captured as you come off stage. We were doing it at the Double Down this weekend. So here we are at the Double Down. Now that we had the blizzard coming in, so the Double Down, it happened. We had 130 athletes compete in 65 different classes in 5.5 hours. On, off, on, off. So my urinalysis collector was busy. But if he wasn't there, then there was somebody there that as that person came off, before they hugged somebody, drank anything, ate anything, did anything, put anything on, went to their gym bag, were like grabbed and escorted to the closed room we had to do the urinalysis testing, and then in you go. And you can't come out, you can't eat anything, you can't drink anything, you can't do anything, you can't go anywhere. You are captured there until you provide a sample. And so that's kind of where it came about, because what's the first thing that somebody fighting a failed urinalysis is going to attack? 9 times out of 10, they're not attacking the result. And I see this all the time when people are criticizing a urinalysis result that came back the wrong way. Almost never are they attacking the result. They're either coming up with mitigating fantasy island stuff that, it was the poppy seeds, or it was the this, or it was the that. Or they're looking like, well, I went home and they called me a day later and got my sample. They're looking for the chain of custody cracks to create the doubt to overturn the decision. And this is something we had to tighten up on, because we don't want to have somebody with a failed urinalysis test end up, getting out into technicality. And that's the other thing with the OCB. We will never, ever, nobody. It's funny how when names get out in the OCB of somebody that's struggling or had a problem with the urinalysis test, it never, ever comes from the OCB. And we always tell the athlete, we're not telling anybody, so, remain silent. Nobody will know these things. It always comes from the athlete. It's always them suddenly going on and defending themselves, and then they create the attention, and then, it turns whatever. But we will never, ever, ever reveal anything that happened with a urinalysis test failure, whether it was for a substance that's banned for 6 weeks or a substance that's banned for 7 years. We're not going to say anything. As a matter of fact, one athlete reached out to me and I got included in a chain of traffic, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You competed in my show. And yes, I'm part of the organizational process, but there are only 2 people that are privy to that information in the entire organization, and I ain't one of them. And I'm not going to know about any of this until it gets all the way to the end of the whatever, and I'm told, hey, go on and alter these placements, and that's all I'm going to know. And I'm one of the owners, and I don't know. So that is another thing that we do. Our chain of custody is so tight, our information line is so tight on that when it happens, there are only 2 individuals in the organization, aside from the WADA lab, because we use a WADA lab. There are only 2 people in the organization that know the results. And then 1 person outside the organization, and that was the individual that was affected. So, we try to do everything correct with the chain of custody, and then we try to do everything correct with information handling after the effect.
Seems like something that has been iterated a lot over time, as, like you said, you're constantly testing these different mousetraps, and so you're just trying to make it as sealed tight as possible. And I want to sort of progress this talk into something, again, more about the future of natural bodybuilding. So where does natural bodybuilding need to evolve to over the next decade to continue to grow?
I don't think it has to do anything other than to stay true to its natural roots. And here's kind of where I want to go with that. This is not a testament against an organization. So this is not, us versus an organization that allows PED use. This is not that at all. This is every single time I go in on YouTube, or I open up a news feed, or I see something, there is another dead PED bodybuilder. It is at an epidemic. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but about 10 years ago, I wrote an article in the magazine that we used to have for the OCB, but I wrote an article, and it was called The Deadpool. Bodybuilding is the most deadly sport in the world. And what I did is back then it was before AI, so it'd be really great to do one now with AI, because then you get like really great numbers. However, I went back through the internet and I found out that there were 3 deaths attributed to the NFL over a decade-long period. There was 1 for professional auto racing. There was 1 for baseball, none for soccer, none for hockey. But at that time, we had 28 attributed high-profile pro bodybuilder deaths due to PED use. And bodybuilding was the most deadly sport in the world. Now, last year, or 2 years ago, I started Googling dead bodybuilder, and I would see how many people pulled up in my feed. And now I have Gemini turn around and I give Gemini instructions. Gemini, can you look all sources, last 12 months, look for the term bodybuilder and look for that has deceased. Omit all accidents and omit anybody over the age of 65. I put 65 as my calling card. And please pull them up. And at any given time, every year, there's between 40 and 60 people that are pulled up. We only hear about the top 8 or 10, but 50 to 60 people. I did it in February, and I asked to go back for 3 years, and there were almost 200 dead bodybuilders under the age of 60 from heart attack or unreported natural causes. So you were asking me, what does natural bodybuilding need to do to evolve to become number one? All we have to do is keep drug testing, keep providing competitors with a fair, safe, fun area to compete, and I think the rest over time will take care of itself, because how much longer can this epidemic go on? How much longer can it go on before people wake up and go, you know what? It's really cool looking at that freak show, but everybody that I want to root for is dead in 5 years. I mean, I think it has the potential to correct itself over time. Now, what's that timeline going to look like? It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years. But as long as natural bodybuilding stays true to natural bodybuilding, I think it'll eventually all get there.
Fantastic. Let's bring this home with the last one. So if you could put one message on a billboard for a teen or young competitor entering natural bodybuilding, what would that message be?
Wow, there's so many messages that we could give to those young teens, those young bodybuilders. You know what? I can't put it on a billboard, but I can answer it with a short little story. When I started bodybuilding back in 1979, we moved to Massachusetts. There was one bodybuilding gym in my area of Massachusetts, and there were 3 of us that were all about the same age that were great friends. Actually, 4 of us that were great friends. And we all started training and competing together. 3 of those individuals went on to use PEDs. All 4 of us won a Mr. USA and a Mr. Universe of some type. Now, I won the drug-tested NABA Mr. USA. I won the AMBC drug-tested nationals. I won the drug-tested Mr. Universe. They went on to, in other federations, the PED-using federations, get the same thing. All right. Now, here's where I'm going round robin. I took the turtle approach. I took the long, the steady. It was more important for me to get up and get that 400-pound squat. It was more important for me to get to the journey than to rush to get to the end and go, hey, look at me, bro. Look how big my muscles are. Look how hard I am. Look at that. Knowing that I cheated along the way. Now we fast forward. I'm at a show 10 years ago in Massachusetts that I'm promoting. And one of the guys, I'm going to leave him nameless because he now too is dead, came to the show, and I see a guy that was just a shell of himself in a wheelchair. And I'm like, Sully. And I look around and I was, hey, what's up? And I'm talking to him, colostomy bag, kidney failure, heart's failing. And he's like, I see you're still doing this thing. Now, 10 years ago, I was still competing. And I'm fresh off, 55 years old. I'm fresh off, or 52 years old, or almost 50 years old. I'm fresh off, a pro victory. And he's like, I haven't been able to walk in 10 years. I've had this health thing. Oh, did you know that so-and-so's dead? And I'm like, no. What are the 4 of us? Oh, and did you know that so-and-so also died? And I'm like, no. One died at 38, one died at 42. And here's my friend here at 50, about the same age that I was. He's like, can I get up on the stage and talk to the crowd? I'm like, by all means, man. You're Mr. America and Mr. Universe. And he reels out there and he said, this guy right here, pointing to me, walked the same path, did the same things, won the same titles. Nobody in the world, nobody that you go to out on the street, does anybody here in this audience know the difference between having won the so-and-so drug-tested national championship or having won the XYZ PED-using national championship? Nobody knew. But he can say that he accomplished the exact same things I did. I'm going to be dead within 2 years, and this guy's going to be at 85 still in the gym cranking it out and doing shows. He died a year later. So that is my message to all you teens out there. You think you're young, you think you're invincible, you think it's going to last forever, and you think it ain't going to make no difference. I am on social media and I watch these kids and I see them on YouTube and I see these kids that, backing on the trend and doing this and covered in acne. And then you see them a year later and they're not posting on social influencers anymore. And you look at them and their physiques are wrecked. They're destroyed. They've ruined their health. 20-year-olds wearing breathing masks because they have such bad sleep apnea that they can't even freaking breathe because they did all that. Yeah. Think about it. A Mr. Universe is still a Mr. Universe. A Mr. America is still Mr. America. A bodybuilding win is still a bodybuilding win. The only people that are going to know the difference are that small culture of people where the 3-letter designator between your title means something, which is less than 1/10 of 1% of the population of the United States. If you win, you won. If you win, you won. It doesn't matter what the designator is, because you know what? There is no fanfare. There's no ticket tape parades. There's nobody winning a bodybuilding show that's going to be invited to the State of Union address at the White House like an Olympic team is going to. There's nobody that's going to be getting a parade down Main Street for winning the next championship with the confetti coming down on a duck boat. That ain't this, bro. You're doing it for the journey. You're doing it for the fulfillment. You're doing it to see how far and what your limitations are. But you also want to do it so that you can see, are you also the best team? Okay, now, are you the fittest 20-year-old? Are you the fittest 30-year-old? Are you the fittest 40-year-old? Are you the fittest 50-year-old? I'm 60 years old, and I can guarantee you I'm in the top 2% of 60-year-old men. Then when I'm 70, I'm going to be in the top 1%. And when I'm 80, I'm going to be in, the 0.09%. By the time I'm 90, I'm going to be number one. Where are you going to be? Because you're going to be 40 years in the grave. And life ain't about the stage, and it ain't about the muscles that you got. Life is about everything that happens to you between the gym and the trophy. It's all that stuff in the middle. It's all that peripheral stuff. It's family. It's friends. It's accomplishments. It's the things it's the environment that you create for yourself that makes you an exceptional human being that has absolutely zero to do with bodybuilding. My successes in life are because of bodybuilding, because it taught me discipline, because it taught me the ability to achieve. All the lessons I learned on how to put muscle, I applied to other areas of my life, and I've had a very, very successful life in a lot of different professional areas. All came from bodybuilding. But if it was all about bodybuilding, I'd be nothing but a washed up bodybuilder that nobody knows my name now with a broken down physique. So life happens outside the gym. And it happens away from all that noise. Don't get wrapped up. Don't be a beautifully wrapped empty box. Maybe I'd put that on a billboard. Maybe that would be my billboard for teens. Don't be a beautifully wrapped empty box. Everything that you want to accomplish in life is outside the gym.
What a powerful message. Sully, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Where
brother.
should people go if they want to connect with you, if they want to sign up for your shows, if they want to get a hold of you on Natural Edge? Where should they go?
Best place to go is on Instagram, Sulcop96, SULCOP 96. That's my Instagram page. If you hit me up there, I can guide you to any show. I can guide you to the Natural Edge. The Natural Edge is now not only on YouTube, it's a YouTube feature, OCB Natural Edge, but it is also a podcast that is on Spotify, iTunes, all those platforms. If you rather listen to stuff when you drive than watch stuff on YouTube, you've got those options right there. And it's not just me. Natural Edge is not just me. It's my team. It's my team. I'm just one talking head among many. We try to put a good amount of information out there for everybody. So, none of this is about me. It's about the shiny people on stage and what we can do for them, and moving it forward with the natural message to try to save some lives.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You got it, brother. Great to see you.
You too.